Hello. I want to talk in this video about the loneliness of our thoughts and our existence, the existence within and outside the realm of relationships. I want to talk about the nature of the man who is doomed forever to be alone. Whatever the situation, it is in the nature of a man to live and to die alone. This is something that has been talked about time and time again in MGTOW, but it is something that men across the world are scared of. And the sad reality is, even back in the day when you were in a relationship, you were still alone in your mind and in your thoughts. And the loneliness that you may be experiencing as a single man is different to the one that you were experiencing before. In the words of the brilliant Vincent MGTOW, loneliness is just another word for being horny. But let's start dissecting the subject of loneliness. A couple of days back, I watched a documentary on the biography of Nikola Tesla. This one man's efforts are seen everywhere around us still, despite the fact that he passed away in 1943. This one man shaped our modern civilization, and even this genius, he died alone in poverty. His vision and imagination were his guns, and he used them to create scientific marvels. The AC current and the radio were two of his most important contributions, and the world never looked back since. This man was portrayed as the visionary of his time. He was famous, a great creator, and a competitive spirit who never gave up promoting his ideas, even when he was on his deathbed. Tesla died alone and in poverty despite his genius, brilliance, and the change that he brought to this ungrateful world. This man was a bachelor and he never had a relationship with any woman. Despite his charisma and fame, he simply refused to engage with the women of his time. He found his work and his science a lot more appealing and important than the females. And despite what every Clary under the sun tells you guys, this man's achievements are more important than the multiple penetration of vaginas. This man was a great man, probably along with Einstein, the most important mind of the 20th century. But even this man, despite his worldwide contributions, ended up passing away alone, and the world never cared. The world always takes, but never gives back. The reality is that our inborn gynocentrism and society's gynocentrism is what is used to prey on men in order to make them more subservient to the governments, to society, and to the feminine. Besides gynocentrism, it appears that the fear of death is a unique driving force for all men. And I talk to many guys who tell me that they are over the fear of death. And to myself, this sounds like an abstract concept that people are constantly making up. To me, it sounds like bullshit. That's because I have seen men who were ready to die. They knew that death was coming to them, yet they were still agitated and they were scared. When the suffering is present, when your body is aching, even when death is seen as preferable to life, people are still frightened of it. The coming unknown and the almost certain possibility of the extinction of your personhood gives every man, no matter how brave and knowledgeable, an agitated experience of fear and confusion due to his unavoidable and certain demise. Try this thought experiment for me if you like. Bring yourself in your bedroom, lie on your bed, turn the lights off, and lie still in place with a pillow behind your head and neck. Close your eyes and start to think about death. Start to think that you are dead. Not only think, go deeper than that. Go deep enough so that you believe that you're actually dead. Once you're that deep into that thought process, what happens next causes panic and immense amount of fear. When you settle into that thought process, you see that the very next thought is, what now? What's next? And there is nothing next. You're not there. You no longer exist. You're gone and you're completely irrelevant. And once you realize that there is nothing else, there is nothing next, this is it. And what this is nothingness. Panic sets in. Your heart pumps as if it's trying to move out of your chest. Adrenaline just spikes and starts pushing you to wake up. You're in essence giving yourself the beginning of a panic attack. It is a thoroughly horrible experience, and I believe it's the experience that people go through just before they die, yet their fate is inevitable. It is no surprise that benzodiazepines are commonly used in supportive care pathways to control the agitation of the patients that they go through before they die. Despite the fact that this is a horrible experiment, bound to make the majority of people trying it panic to their very core, I believe that every man should try this thought experiment at least once, and they will understand that as men, as human beings, the fear of death is the ultimate fear that we can have. Is it surprising that so many religions exist, all covering and explaining the meaning of life and what happens after death? And even religious people, the vast majority of them, somewhere deep inside of them, they do suspect that perhaps the story they so eagerly want to believe, it may just be a fairy tale. And death is the reality always waiting, the end of everything that you were and ever meant. In a vast universe for an infinitesimally unimportant collection of atoms such as yourself, you will of course never be remembered. Despite your achievements and accomplishments, you never will be remembered, because at some point, even if you change the whole universe, there will be no one left in the universe to remember you. And that is the harsh and undiluted truth. But why is this truth important? Men, like every other human being, they fear death. In my talk with His Highness Mr. Stardusk, we talked about how society at present is secluded from any idea of death, that when death strikes, the experience for Westerners is uniquely surreal and unpleasant. This fear of living alone and having to experience the ultimate crossing to the world beyond is what brings the idea of loneliness to the table. At some point, as people age, the idea of a life partner, and not a sexual one, becomes a lot more appealing to them. How many times have men been told that they're going to die miserable and alone? The loneliness part, it really does something to us. It bothers us because we humans are social creatures, and as social creatures we crave social interaction. Social isolation has been proven time and time again to have worse health outcomes, and it promotes substance addiction, depression, and all sorts of mental health problems. And it doesn't just stop there. Social isolation also promotes worse outcomes in chronic conditions such as diabetes and cardiovascular disease, etc. Therefore, loneliness is validated as not being good for you. But let's break down the loneliness part for a man. I've been in relationships, and in one of those relationships I cohabitated with an ex. But you can run similar experiments just by observing alone from your own family structure, or just observing men in your life. Men always are alone in the household. They are the quiet creatures that sit somewhere in a corner inside the house, alone, in order to exist only with their thoughts. Men are the solitary creatures that will engage with you, and in their engagement they will share nothing from their emotional world. Men are the creatures that will prioritize others over themselves all the time, putting their needs second and third in order for other people to get by. Men are the ones who live as guests in someone else's dream, in a home that they paid for but doesn't feel theirs, with children that they fathered but they haven't raised. Men are the ones who constantly need to filter their speech and their thoughts in order to continue living this bearable and semi-solitary existence. I remember when I was dating and living with my ex in a beautiful apartment overseeing the city that I lived in. It was a great apartment, and for everyone that knew me, I lived with a beautiful young woman, and apparently I had it all. I had great sex, and at least initially I had a partner who I cared for and felt that she cared for me as well. Yet, even during those days of blissful ignorance, I felt like I was suffocating. Even during those days, I felt that I had to put up an act in order to keep this woman happy and keep her quiet. the balcony in the freezing UK weather became my favorite place. A pack of cigarettes was my friend and companion. I would walk outside and stand on the balcony or sit back on this inclined chair and light up and just look at the lights across from me and listen to the city noise and just think about nothing. This was my way to deal with an almost unnatural situation. And of course my smoking eventually became an issue, actually quite early on, and I eventually quit. So even that was taken away from me. And thinking about this now, I remember my father when I was growing up. He would always come home, see us, make sure that his children were okay, and he would almost without fail escape somewhere in order to be alone, every day. This would initially happen in a corner of the house, but later on, as we grew up, he would drive off for a couple of hours in order to clear his head, by doing some gardening or some farming or whatever was on his mind. And my mom's eternal struggle to this very day is to force my father away from his hobby and back home in order to spend all of his time with her. And women, they do that. Every moment of solitude that we have as men is time that is seen as us not providing or attending to them. And the longer you live, the more they take. And this loneliness and solitude that you once had and cherished, which in essence is the only time you had to be yourself, is eventually taken away from you. And you become the loneliest person and trapped in a reality you cannot escape from, because you're held there by a sense of honor and duty to your woman and to your children. It is not that type of loneliness that men like myself and yourselves fear. It is not that type of loneliness that puts the fear in our hearts. No. It is the loneliness away from ourselves. It is the loss of ourselves and the eternal and forever muting of everything that ever made us, us. And that can occur whether you are living alone or whether you're living with someone else. At times I hear MGTOW complain about the loneliness of their existence and the difficulties they face due to social isolation. And I know that the biological need to interact with people is something that can be rectified by engaging with individuals. But even so, this is not the type of loneliness that bothers men. Initially, it may be related to male mother need, or it could be a hunger for intellectual challenging, or it could be the fact that you're growing older and fear starts to set in. And I know that whatever the answers to all of these questions are, getting new friends, having a relationship, doing a combination of those things, you will end up feeling alone, again, like every man stuck in that relationship. The truth is that we live and we die alone, my brothers. We think and we understand alone. We feel and empathize alone. It is a very tall task to expect your life to mean anything to anyone else. It is a tall task to expect to be accepted and respected for the man that you are, with all your deficiencies and all your proficiencies. All of this is impossible because no one will ever truly know you or truly try to know you. It is even worse to expect all of these aspects of yourself to be accepted by someone who is not you, does not operate like you, and does not think like you. And all in the name of killing and filling that vacuum in your heart in order to feed the addiction that you have been born with. And all of this because of your fear of death, because of your fear of loneliness, because of that ever-aching male mother need for constant seeking of female approval and validation. MGTOW is a move away from that line of thinking. MGTOW is a move to look within for the answers to your questions. MGTOW is a move to change your line of thinking to focus to the only person that ever truly cared for you, and that person is yourself. MGTOW means much more than a move away from traditionalist relationships. We're men that seek the truth and seek understanding to the tougher questions that shape our existence, and the fear of death and the fear of loneliness is something that is very real, and has been talked about by a great many philosophers. However difficult, the fear of death is not a problem that needs solving, it is a fact that needs accepting. And knowing and accepting that all men, despite how big and important, despite how small and unimportant, will eventually be extinct, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And knowing this truth liberates you to live as you must. And if you have something left to give, then give something back. Trust your thoughts to guide you to the truth that you seek, my brothers. Thank you for listening. This was Nico Chosky talking about all things man.